Folks, if you're here for developing policies in community college archives, you are in the right place. My name is Brooke Chuka. I'm an outreach specialist for the State Archives of North Carolina. And I'm going to be your virtual host or moderator for today. This is a virtual presentation organized by the Traveling Archivist Program, also known as TAP, administered by the State Archives of North Carolina. So in this session, we're going to discuss developing archival policies in the community college environment, thanks to 3 experts who have graciously offered to share their expertise with us. We're going to talk about some general advice and best practices, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper into how that advice might be applied in the community college setting here in North Carolina. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper and focus on one particular project that has involved multiple community partnerships and how policies and plans created at the start of that project have helped keep the project on track as it has grown. But before we get started, we have 2 special guests with us today, and they'd like to say a few words. So first, I would like to introduce everyone to Sarah Koontz, our state archivist. She'd like to extend a quick welcome, as she did last week. If you were able to join us last week, I know we have quite a few people doing both sessions. And so she wants to tell us a little bit more about the TAP program and what led us to create this webinar for you today. So Sarah, when you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy you can join us. As Brooke said, I know some of you were with us last week for a training session and some of you are new, so I'll try not to be too repetitive from last week, but just a little bit of an overview about the TAP program. So the TAP program was something that was developed under grant funding with the State Historical Records Advisory Board, which that's a board that's appointed by the governor and is administered by our agency, the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And through grant funding from the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, that's the grant funding arm of the National Archives. A few years ago, we developed the Traveling Archivist Program designed to assist cultural heritage groups of all types with capacity building and whatever that would look like. So that program has evolved. It can take you can see it in on-site visits. You can see it now in remote consultations. In the era of Zoom, we can talk to people remotely. We've done training. We've done capacity building for how to write grants, federal grants. And in our most recent SHRAB grant, the current one we're working on, we do have some funding for TAP to do on-site and virtual visits. And as part of that, what we uncovered in doing those virtual visits with the selected institutions was that we were finding some common themes. And one of those was a need for training in certain areas, and policies was one that came up. And since one of our big focus areas for TAP recently has been the Community College Archives group, we thought it would be helpful to open up this type of training to everybody as opposed to just maybe the 2 or 3 TAP participants. So hence the starting of this training. And policies, as we were saying at the top of the hour before you may have joined us, we've got some pretty graphics on the screen, don't lend themselves to very exciting conversation. They're sort of like going to the dentist. We know we need to do it, but it's not always the most fun activity, but it's very foundational. So I hope we'll have a good conversation today. We certainly have a great panel. And we're happy to connect with you if you want more information about the TAP or any of the resources or training or things that they've done in the past or could do in the future. If you have a suggestion for some TAP resources, just let us know. And I'll turn it back over to Brooke.
Thank you, Sarah. That's great. And yes, I'll be contacting all of our registrants for the session later today, and I'll include links to our TAP website. And if anyone has any particular questions about the program, you can obviously ask them today in the chat or email me directly, since you'll have that email address. All right. And I'm just realizing I need to get back to my slides here. We have one more person who would like to say a few words as well, and that's Courtney Bailey. Some of you may be familiar with her already. But she'd like to say a few words as we get going about retention schedules and the like. So Courtney, I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. And one of the reasons I think why I was included today is a recognition that when you think about librarians and archivists, oftentimes we are expected to know a little bit of something about almost everything. So even if records management is not exactly in your job description, we assume that at some point probably somebody is going to ask you something about it. So we wanted to make sure that you have a face and a name of someone who can help you if those sorts of questions do crop up on your campus. So as Brooke said, I'm a records management analyst, and one of the groups with whom I work obviously are the community colleges. And the things that I can do to help you, we've already created a retention and disposition schedule. So that identifies what the records are on the community college campuses, how long they need to be retained. Along with that, we've indicated which are the ones more likely to have historical value. So if you're thinking about developing an archives, that might be a starting point for you. And there's also a brochure, and I can drop links for each of these in the chat in just a minute. But then there also might be other sorts of records things that come up. As y'all are talking about policies, there are certainly policies related to those sorts of things, you know, whether it's a general records management policy, a public records policy for how those sorts of things are handled. And I know we have somebody from UNC Greensboro on the call today, so I'll point out they have a good public records policy easily accessible on their website. There could be technology specific kinds of policies and procedures. Related to that, we have an electronic records policy template on our website that might be useful if your campus wants to document some things about how you handle electronic records, be they born digital records or things that you're scanning. We also have some documentation about social media best practices. So if you're thinking about using social media, or you already are and want to develop some best practices or some policies around that, then we can also assist with that. So that's kind of the menu of things with which I can help you. And you have my contact information here. If there are other questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Great. And Courtney, you touched on a few things that we're not going to get around to talking about today. So that's fantastic. And yeah, sharing those links would be fantastic as well. And I can also email those out following the session. All right. And I'm sure many of our audience has already worked with you, Courtney. But if they didn't have a face for the name, they do now. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk developing archival policies. I'm thrilled to introduce to you our three speakers for today. First, we're going to hear from Erin Lorimore. She has served as the University Archivist at UNC Greensboro since 2011. She currently serves as University Archives representative on the board of the North Carolina Community College Archives Association. She's been an active member of the Society of American Archivists since 2001 and served on the organization's council from 2016 to 2019. She's going to open our conversation by providing some best practice advice on collections development policies. And then from there, we'll hear from Erin Alsop. She is the archivist for Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte. She's also the co-founder of the North Carolina Community College Archives Association. She's going to dive a little bit deeper by examining how to apply that best practice advice in the community college environment and share her experience with that. And Alan Unsworth is going to wrap up our program for today. He is Department Chair of Student and Instructional Support Services at Surrey Community College. Alan is a former president and webmaster of the North Carolina Community College Library Association. He currently serves as the community college representative on the NC Live Executive Board and is membership director for the North Carolina Library Association. He's going to share his experience with the value of policies in collaborative environments. So he's going to discuss some policies for metadata consistency when working across multiple organizations on the same project. So I know a number of community colleges are doing these community-based scanning projects, and so he's going to be a great resource for you folks. If you have a question during the presentations, please feel free to drop that into the chat. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so we can get going. But if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat box or the Q&A I'll be monitoring both of those so our presenters can focus on their discussion. But as we go through, we may take questions in between presenters. I may need to save them for the end, just depends on timing. But that should cover everything, okay? To start things off, I'm gonna turn it over to Erin Larimore now. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Let me get this pulled up. Yay. Okay. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about collection development policies for archives. And I know many of you are librarians, so you probably have some pretty extensive experience, or at least some experience, either developing or at least working with a collection development policy. I have found in my work as an archivist that having a strong collection development policy, it's essential to all aspects of our work. And it's essential to have it, but it's even more essential to talk about it and promote it and get buy-in from higher up. So I'm going to talk a little bit, start with institutional mission and collecting. Courtney actually kind of hinted at this earlier. I do want to kind of acknowledge that a lot of us have two broad mandates. One is institutional documentation and one is around a collecting theme. I say there are two broad mandates, but most of the time, all of this is housed under the same department. So I'm going to be focusing, the institutional mission is kind of what Courtney was talking about, the records management part of things, the records that your institution produces and your responsibility in terms of collecting those materials, providing access to those materials, and other things that come from basically within your organization. But when you're thinking collection development policy, this is kind of in addition to, this runs parallel to that records retention schedule that Courtney was mentioning. It's focused on your collecting mission as an archives. And I know that some of you have that, some of you don't. Some of you may want to have it and you don't have it yet. But collecting archives, that mission is focused on collecting around a theme. This could be, you know, a geographic locale. We collect about the history of Greensboro. It could be focused on a subject. We also have a your weird trivia fact for the day. UNC Greensboro has the world's largest cello music archive. That's not something where we're just collecting materials from, you know, some roving band of cellists at UNCG. This is an international collection that we bring in. These types of themes often will pop up at historical societies, manuscript repositories that might fall at colleges and universities, community archives or public libraries. And sometimes these repositories actually don't have a formal responsibility for documenting their own organization. They're just looking outward. But they may also have that internal collecting mission too. My job is, as the university archivist at UNC Greensboro, formally is focused specifically on the records of the university. That said, I also work with a lot of community organizations where we're collecting their materials. And these are organizations that aren't part of the university formally. So as I was mentioning, this is kind of thinking about these two things in parallel, a collection development policy for external materials and a records retention policy or records management techniques for those internal materials. So when you're thinking about developing a collection development policy focused on archival materials and focused on that external collecting, there are 5 key things that I think really need to be not just thought about, but actually written down and documented and discussed with not just your boss, but as far up as you can go in the chain of command. The more institutional buy-in you can get for this, the better. And I'll talk for a little bit about why that's so important. But, you know, I think the first step for anything is just knowing why the heck you're doing it in the first place. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of this archives? Is it to collect material? Is it to only document your college? It could be one of the two, it could be both, but just knowing kind of what the statement of purpose is and what those expectations are, that's an important first step. And the person who is managing the archives can have say in that, but ultimately you want to find out what the folks above you think your mission is, because honestly, it may not align with what you think your mission is. And so having those types of discussions as step one and framing that around developing this collection development policy can really help you both in the short term and in the long run. So you also want to think about why you're doing this. Ultimately, with any archives, you're doing it to provide access to someone. There's someone who needs to use these records. You're not just collecting for the sake of collecting, because otherwise you're a hoarder. You're collecting to make these materials accessible. But the question is, to whom? And again, this is something we're having those conversations with your supervisor and with your library director, and honestly, as far up the chain as you can get, is really essential. Who are you serving? What are you providing to them? And then what resources are both currently available to the archives, and what resources would the archives need in order to meet those institutional demands or understandings or thoughts about what you should be doing. There could be a real big gap there between what you're expected to do and what resources you have to do it. After all of that, after thinking about that, then you're going to think about the collecting areas and that external environment. What are you collecting? Who else is collecting it? And what all is out there? You want to get that framework though for like why you're bothering and what you have to deal with before you kind of get to that piece. So it's a lot of work to develop a collection development policy, and it's especially a lot of work if you're truly working to get that buy-in up and down the chain of command. But there are lots of benefits that come from doing this work. And lots of benefits, again, like I said a second ago, in the short term, but also in the long term, to really kind of help you grow. So obviously, a collection development policy provides guidance in accepting donations, in going out and actively collecting materials, if you happen to have money to buy something, which I don't know that any of us have that these days. Purchasing, all of these things, that's kind of the obvious first piece. But it also benefits the researcher. Nobody on earth can collect everything on everything. And that even includes everything on like local history or topics like that. You want to have a structured policy around specific themes so that you can actually build a collection that's useful for the researchers you're intending to find. Researchers are usually looking across multiple collections to look at broad themes. They're not just saying, I only want to look at the records of this one place or this one person. They want to see how that person interacts with a broader community. However you might define that community. It could be like a professional community, all the cellists in the world, or it could be the local community, all the people in Greensboro. But it's rare to find a researcher who only wants to see one collection. And so having that kind of focus really benefits the researcher. It can make you a one-stop shop for a certain theme. That benefits the researcher, but I'll be honest with you, it also benefits your ability as the archivist to advocate for what you need and to bring in more attention and to bring in more collections. Once people know where to go once you have a certain kind of mass of materials. If we have a cellist in the world who's looking to donate their materials, they know to call us because all the other cellists are already here at UNCG with their papers. Like draws like in a lot of ways. And so once you kind of have that core collection going, you can really grow. But I also find that one of honestly the most useful pieces of a sound collection development policy is that you can tell people no, and you can point to a policy in which to do it. At that point, as the archivist, it's not you saying no. It's not me, Erin, not liking your collection or not wanting it or saying it's not good enough. It's me, the archivist, looking at our formal policy that has buy-in up the chain and saying it doesn't fit our mission here. Maybe I can help you find somewhere else where it does, but this is not the best place for it. Is that going to 100% eliminate hurt feelings? No. but it can largely soothe hurt feelings that might come both with donors and honestly with administrators who like to just bring you things. My analogy for this a lot of times is I laugh and say that sometimes folks every institution has a person who can be like a cat who likes to bring you an unwelcome dead mouse gift. They're so proud of themselves when they bring it, but it really doesn't need to be with you. This can really kind of help eliminate that helpful cat situation, and it can serve as a training opportunity in the future. Again, is it 100% foolproof? No, but it can give you something to point to that other people understand, and makes it less of a you as a person made this choice and more of a the policy says type of thing. And then finally, honestly, we found, again, like I said, that donors like to have their materials with other collections that are similar in topic. They like to be part of their group. And so that can help to draw more donations. So ultimately, again, when you're looking at acquisitions, if you have a sound collection development policy, your first question when someone brings you something or when you're going out into the community is, does this fit our collection policy? Is this something we collect? That's step one. But it also is going to allow you to say, do we have the resources to properly preserve this and make it accessible? So again, part of this is looking at what you have, what resources you have, where are those gaps? And do you have, for instance, if someone has a slew of old reel-to-reel videos, reel-to-reel films, and they may be awesome, they may be the greatest films that document what you have, do you have the resources to properly preserve those and make them accessible? I'll be honest, right now, if somebody came to us with 100 reel-to-reel films documenting downtown Greensboro in the 1930s, that would be awesome. We'd love to have it. We don't have the ability to properly preserve it and make it accessible with the resources we have at this moment. And we have to be able to point to our collection development policy and not just say these are resources we don't have, but go to our own administrators and say, these are resources we don't have. This is a collection that very squarely fits in our collection policy that you all love and have agreed to. Is it possible to get the resources we need to do this work? All of this kind of factors in so that ultimately, again, we're not acquiring just to acquire. We're acquiring with an eye towards access. And then, of course, any acquisitions you do and any of the policies you create lead to creating more forms and more records. You know, there are rules in place in terms of what is documented as state employees for keeping materials, but also, you know, no one is in a job for like a perpetual forever. Eventually, someone else is going to need to know how you acquired these materials. For that, the gray box that you see there, we actually keep acquisitions folders. When we acquire a new collection, we keep a folder. That's we just keep it for us. It's not made publicly available usually, at least not freely available. If someone asks, we do make it available to them. But ultimately, this is a folder that contains information about how we got the material, why we got the material, what conversations took place about the material. You know, if we got those 50 old film reels and we have an email from the provost saying, I will provide you with X amount of money to make these accessible. We need to be able to show, yes, you promised that this money would come, or in 20 years when someone else is the archivist, they need to know how we got these materials digitized. How was that handled? So we have these folders that do that. But the key piece of any of these folders is our donor form. We actually have a form that was vetted through our campus legal that formally transfers ownership, physical ownership of the materials to the archives. And that's an important distinction to make there. It transfers the physical collection to us, not necessarily the intellectual ownership and copyright. We give people the option of providing us, of donating copyright, along with the physical materials. But a person, like if I'm giving you my archives, I can only give you my vested copyright, so that I can only give you copyright over the things I personally created. If you wrote me a letter and it's in my collection, I can give the physical letter to the archives, but I can't say, oh, and you can have the copyright for that too. Now, that doesn't mean we can't make the material accessible. We can make it freely available to researchers. We can use it in instruction. We can use it in exhibits. Our donor form allows us to do that. We make it very clear in that form that these things could be used in that way. We make it very clear if we are given copyright that we may be digitizing the materials. But it's important to have that formal form, because the one thing you don't want is a situation where in 5 years you've donated, you've put in a lot of work to process a collection, to put it in these nice acid-free boxes and folders, to store it. You've put in all this work and labor and money, but you don't have a donor form, so the donor comes back and says, I want my stuff back. You don't want that. And so this donor form ensures that that physical ownership and physical transfer is 100% understood. So, as Brooke was saying, there aren't a lot of fun pictures to go with talking about collection development, but that's a lot of information to take in. And there are lots of examples that you can find online of collection development policies from institutions of a lot of different sizes. One resource that I think is particularly useful, if you Google Society of Georgia Archivists Forms, they actually have a forms forum that collects a lot of different collection development policies, a lot of different donor forms, a lot of different exhibit forms. Any kind of form you might be looking for archives, you can find some examples from the Society of Georgia Archivists there. And they have examples from both public institutions, so the UGA system and some other public schools like that, as well as even things like the Delta, the airline museum. So you're going to find different types of institutions having forms in that forms forum, which is very hard to say. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or I'll be on the call for a while.
Great, thank you, Erin. That was fantastic and super informative. And I appreciate that you touched on transfer of copyright with with all of this, because that could be an entirely different session. But this is great. Thank you. I see it's almost 10:30, so I think we'll hold questions and go ahead and move on to our next speaker, just to make sure we can get everyone in today. So yeah, Erin, also, I'm turning things over to you.
Hey everyone, just give me 1 second. Let me share my screen here. There we go. Okay, oh wait. Let me know if you can see this okay. Can you see that all right?
Yes, at least I'm seeing your screen.
Okay.
And as soon as you, I guess, start the presentation, it should switch over to presentation mode.
Okay, sorry, my computer is very slow today. All right.
There we go.
Wonderful. Hey guys, hey everyone. Hello again. And for those who are new here today, I'm Erin. I'm the archivist for Central Piedmont Community College. And tying in a lot with what Erin has said, and also connecting to what Alan will say after my presentation, I'm going to talk about policies that protect, collect, and connect your archive collections. So first things first, assess what you already have. What are your current library policies? Do you have a disaster plan that helps protect your materials? Do you have collection development policies that Erin thoroughly went over previously? So I'm really glad that some of the points she made, I'm going to tie in as well. And those policies help to collect, which is also inclusive of records retention. And then what are your access policies? So how do you connect these collections and what policies surround that? Do any of the, if you have these current policies in place, do any of them currently include institutional heritage materials, archive materials, things of that nature? If they don't right now, that's okay. So hopefully, points that we share in this presentation can help prepare you for those conversations to have those materials included. So policies that protect, oops, sorry, I'm like not sure why this is, let me just move this. Sorry, I'll just leave that up for now. Hopefully it'll go away. But so anyway, so policies that protect. What's your library disaster plan? And disaster plans help us to figure out who to call and how to handle materials in the event of emergency. And this is just on the right here is just the cover sheet of our larger disaster plan, which includes recommended supplies and what we currently have. But this also includes contacts, emergency contacts who to call, who are the building captains, things of that nature. So really how to get the plan in motion in the event of an emergency. And if you're not sure what is currently in your disaster plan, speak with your supervisor or have those conversations with the dean of libraries, whoever it may be. But full disclosure, this disaster plan does not include what to do in the event of a ransomware attack. We had that event happen to us this past February, and the college had lost a significant amount of records. So hopefully, the college as a whole, I think from what I understand, they're working to revamp those disaster plan policies to include more digital records and what to do as a result, if anything was lost. Secondly, policies that collect. So these are collection development policies, using the community college records retention schedule as our kind of hook, line, and sinker in a way to say, this is what we need to save permanently. And these are types of records that we don't need to save permanently, but here's a contact such as Courtney Bailey or even your campus registrar to help coordinate those things that fall within some sort of retention period. And then also taking stock of what's happening in your community. So if your current collection development policy doesn't necessarily include community-based records, maybe it could as a way to strengthen what you have and how you promote yourself to your larger institution. So at least for us, these are 4 examples of how we've kind of edited and reworked our collection development policies to include materials like this. So we worked with the alumni group of the Central High class of 53. We worked to, further promote, because we already had materials related to Carver and Mecklenburg colleges and the Central Industrial Education Center. But we kind of, at least in terms of, and I'll talk about access in a second, but we worked with the Digital Heritage Center to get these materials more widely accessible. So that could be something you include as well. Works of students, faculty, and staff. This was a big thing for us because there really was no mention, not that students and staff and faculty weren't mentioned, it's just their works weren't preserved. And we thought that this would be a really unique opportunity for these particular members of our community to be aware of the archives, to get more involved in what it is that we're doing, and really to help promote. And then lastly, LGBTQ plus history, that was not included in our records at all, at least as of about a month ago. So I've been working with our Pride group on campus to make sure that their voices and their story related to the institution is preserved in the archives. So this is, and the link is up at the top. I don't have really any images in this presentation, unfortunately, but if anyone does want to browse further, you can just click on this link here. But here is our collection development for archives. So what we collect, what we don't collect, how to transfer records, a copy of the retention schedule, which I now remember is probably outdated. So Courtney, don't, I'll work on that in a second. Don't judge. But also, collection guides and finding aids and things like that. And we just use LibGuides because it's a tool that our library already has, and it's something that people are used to seeing. So we just are we took this on as a way to promote what we have, but also help answer any questions in the event that someone isn't able to contact us by phone or email. So then we have policies that connect. So what are your access policies? How do you make things accessible online? So again, is that a LibGuide type of thing, or do you have a database? I know Alan will talk about their endeavors with that. But then there are other sources like ContentDM, Omeka, a variety of things, even WordPress. It just depends on how much flexibility you have and the tools available as well. So I know that, how to connect online is more of an access point question than a policy question, but you could, really include that, in the larger framework of your access policy as well. And lastly, also the Digital Heritage Center, they've been a really big help, and the state archives. So, between those two institutions, if you have issues with putting things online, they're at least there to help. So then secondly, what is your reading room access policy? So this is, if you do have a space where people can come and handle materials in person and conduct research in person, what are those policies surrounding that? And it could be things just as basic as, no food or drink, pencil only, that kind of thing. And then I kind of outline that in the reading room etiquette. But also instruction sessions and incorporating all of these three things into how we provide access, and documenting how we provide access in those three categories, I think is a great way to show not just transparency, but also for like data purposes over time. If you can, based on these policies, if you're tracking data, how many classes you teach, how many researchers come to the reading room or hits that you have online, all of that data could be used for further promotion in the future or advocacy, which is something that we talked about last week as well. So again, this is just another screenshot of that LibGuide page, research and use of materials. Currently, I know most of us, if not all of us, our reading rooms are closed due to COVID right now, but hopefully that will change in the future, we'll see. But so this is kind of what we have in place at this point. So lastly, some words of wisdom, find your allies. I said that last time, and it's a point that I always make because it was told to me as well. And it's one of those pieces of wisdom that just sticks with you, and find that within and outside of your library, because I think that would also help to strengthen your case, and use those allies to help promote your efforts. And, the state archives, the TAP program, UNC Greensboro, the Digital Heritage Center, all four and even more allies that this group has formed. It's been really helpful for us to get our cause out there. Update and have those conversations to help update the policies that include archival materials, even if it's a small group of news clippings and that's all you have. Can you incorporate that into your disaster plan policies, into collection development policies somehow? And those are some conversations that you can have with your supervisor. And then, if possible and or necessary, develop specific policies for archives. If you have a lot of stuff or a significant amount of materials that you already have an index for, have those larger conversations, but you may need support. I know for us to have the collection development policy approved, at least in relation to the records retention schedule, it had to go to cabinet and have them approve it. So those are some hurdles that you may or may not be aware of. But again, if you have any questions, that's all I have. So I'll stop sharing. But yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and happy to help in any way.
Great, thank you, Erin. That was fantastic. And I loved seeing how you use LibGuides to display your policies. Because I will say, early on in this process, I was doing lots of Googling to see what was out there, and those LibGuides came up in my searching. So,
yes, it's a great tool and it's user friendly. So, and most of us who don't really have the funds to acquire a database. I mean, granted, we did get a database, but it took years, no exaggeration there. So, and it's still not even in good shape to provide access at that point. So from here on out, we'll use LibGuides, I think. But thank you.
Great. Okay, and so let's go ahead and turn things over to Alan to round out our program. So I'll go ahead and start my video, but Alan, take it away.
Okay, let me go ahead and share what I've got here. All right. Blow that up a little bit. Okay, so now that we've talked, it's about some of the more general policies. I guess my job here is to talk about something a little more practical, sort of how we've implemented some policies and procedures in an actual project. So at Surry Community College, for the past 4 years, every year we've gotten a grant project renewed that we call under the umbrella Surry County Digital Heritage. Each one of those years we focused on a different sort of I guess, thing. Just like first year we did communities. We weren't really understanding we would do this 4 years. So the first year we focused on just preserving records from various communities within our county. The next year we focused on churches, the next year businesses, and this year we're focusing on family records. We started using Omeka Classic. We moved on to Omeka S. But the big thing that is relevant is that we had to establish policies and procedures because we are collaborating with a number of different groups at different levels. So some of these are partners we are simply collaborating with on what sort of materials do you have? What can we scan? Hey, give us a little bit of money to help us purchase software or to renew licenses and such. So there's different levels of collaboration. But the very last one, the Mount Airy Museum of Regional History, they have been a critical partner with us because not only have they provided money, they've also provided materials and people that have been working for the project. So because of that, we've had to figure out sort of how we were going to work between our library, which we're the ones that sort of house the entire project, and the museum, and how we would come together to form sort of ideas about how we're going to keep rules in place so the project doesn't get way out of hand. During COVID, we had people working from home, but all the time we've had people working in different locations. We have a scanning station at the regional museum or museum and multiple scanning stations at the library. And I'm also going to talk about some of the other things we've done to get out there. We've done some scanning days where we basically gone out to the public and promoted days where we would bring scanners out to other locations, like the public libraries, and let anybody come bring the materials. They were hesitant about like letting us borrow their stuff. They could bring it to a scanning day and we would scan it right in front of them. So I guess later on, when you get the PowerPoint materials for this, these will be linked up, these forms. We have a temporary custody form. We keep that at our public service desk and the museum so that anybody who decides to donate at any time has to fill that form out. And that form is basically just to get contact information, but also to get copyright permission so that we can always know we can put the material online, because without that, it's not of that much use to us. So we are constantly making sure that we have custody of it, but also we have the access to put this thing online and to always make it available on our website. We also have a metadata form. That metadata form is something that we can use when we have time with a person. So a donor, if a donor gives us something like at a scanning day, we can put this metadata form in front of them and it walks them through steps of, okay, so basic stuff. Here's my name. This is when I think this was created. These are the people that are important to the document or the material, like who's in the photo, the names of the people. So the metadata form is great when we have somebody in front of us and we can get the information straight from their mouth. We don't always use that form when things are just thrown at us and they walk away because, we don't have the information. But if we have the time and if we have the person, that metadata form is great because we can really drill down with the person right in front of us and make sure we're getting everything they know about what they're giving to us. Okay, we also have the deed of gift form, which I've stuck here. This is different from the temporary custody. This is when someone is just giving us something to keep in our archives, which of course we do across the college, but for this project, we've also gotten a number of people who have given us stuff that we have kept forever. And of course, that's a space constraint because we don't have a whole lot of space here. But this is the form we give to them. So just a visual there for the deed of gift, different from the donation or different from the temporary donor. All right, so as I've gotten to talk about a little bit, the metadata, keeping consistent sort of rules in place is really important with the metadata. So we realized this going into the project that this was going to be it's going to be an issue. And it was going to be an issue in the library, even if the project had just been in the library, nowhere else. But because we knew we were having people working other places, we had to maintain a lot of communication. So luckily we had relationships already built in place between our employees at the library and the main employee at the museum for the grant. So we would be in constant communication, like at least weekly, talking to them. They would turn timesheets into us. So there was always this ongoing sort of, we know they're going to be in communication with us no matter what. But every semester we would hold a regular meeting. I'm going to show you some of the results of those meetings in a second. We did these mainly in person, but of course during COVID we had to use Teams. But we were having very regular meetings to sort of say, hey, this is coming up. How do we want to word this? Do I put an S on this or not? Because obviously, as you know, like if you put, like you call it churches instead of church, that's going to screw up some of the linking on a website. At least with the system we use, Omeka, it has to be precise every time for the links to constantly bring back all of the right materials. So as I said, the employees are in constant contact with each other to develop basically a shared vocabulary, a shared file. I'm going to show you how we name all the files we create, and to make sure, like we have abbreviations that we use too in the files that we had to come to an agreement on. So these regular meetings, and we had at least one big meeting every year. So when the grant was approved, we all get together in July as soon as we started the grant, and everyone would come together at the library and we'd sit down with a whiteboard and we start hashing out some of the details. Like, this is what I foresee to happen. This is going to be some of the main terms that we know we're going to have to deal with. Let's decide now how we're going to deal with this when it comes up. So the first one, this was the first year we ever did the project. So this was our communities year. And again, this sort of worked out in a really good way for us because, and I'll describe later, like it really did benefit us starting from a communities angle, even though it sort of is redundant now because everything we're doing year after year, it relates to these communities. Our first year focused just on little townships and areas in the county. So near Mount Airy, there's a community called Toast. I don't think there's a post office there. It's just like a little area, right? And so everyone knows this area is Toast, or this area called Siloam. We have these, everyone has these in their counties. It's not a real place, but it is a place. So we focused on gathering materials from those areas and tagging them as such. But then within those communities, we would have, of course, other subjects, other tags, other things we wanted to include. And so this is just sort of a brainstorming you'll see here. This definitely expanded out, but you'll sort of see we kind of thought about, okay, how do we want to handle this? How do we handle this? And we had to expand, as I said, a lot on this as it happened. This was just sort of the initial meeting of, this is kind of what our initial thoughts were. And then the bottom there, you'll see subjects and tags. That was sort of the hierarchy that we're thinking that we were going to deal with. So everything is Surry County, right? So we started at that level. And then after that, we're going to deal with a town or the community. So Mount Airy or Ararat or whatever the little area is. And we wanted to put space, parentheses, N.C after every one. So everything has to be perfect in order for the system to generate for the links to work properly and pull back all of the relevant information. So anyway, we started to think about sort of a hierarchy of how we're going to make sure every time you have an item, I start with this, I work my way down. And the businesses was the same. Here's some of the stuff that came out of our first business meeting was basically, okay, we've got a community. So the second year we started with the businesses and we said, well, we can keep doing the community because we started with community. Let's just keep using the community as our initial thing. So we start with Surry County and then community. So we're constantly building that community collection all the time. Year after year after year, we built that because we're just adding it on as a tag to everything else we do. So we're just getting more specific. So county, community, and then We'll go to retail or wholesale, these big underlying categories, manufacturing, medical. And then the next one below that was more specific, like clothing or grocery or textile. So we always are narrowing down and getting more and more granular as we go. So this was what happened during the business year. We did churches as well. We did the same thing with churches. So I don't have a picture here, but we did Surry County, Mount Airy, United Methodist, and then it might be something related to United Methodist Church, like a handout, or I'm not sure what we called them, but the Sunday flyers that you get. We had a word for that. I can't think of. So we would go down. So at the end of it, we had everything to do with Mount Airy and everything to do with the United Methodist Church in Mount Airy or churches in Mount Airy. And then from there, you can get to a link where you can see all the other stuff that's related to those. So you can kind of work your way down. That's the goal. Doing the website has been a lot of work. I've been doing that, and it's not as nice as you would think. It's like a full-time job basically, because you'd really have to, in order to break things out in a hierarchical way where everyone can see everything they want, the way a professional website is, it takes a lot of hand coding and a lot of work. So it's not our website. I put it in the chat. It's not as perfect as we want, but we're working on it. And that's something we can do year after year after year. We can build on that and make it better and better. Right now, we're like desperately just trying to scan stuff and get it online. So we're not quite to the perfect spot for sure, especially on a website. So I mentioned we have a kind of a structure for how we do our file names. And this was one of the first things that we did. And I can't remember who I found this from, but I did some searching and I found some good examples of this. And so I borrowed this from somebody. I don't remember who, but it's not my creation. So we started with 3-letter code for community. So we have this standardized. We have sheets all in our scanning locations with all these abbreviations on them. So DOB, Dobson, that's our county seat. And then the next step, you underscore, and then you do the collection. Every collection that we create, we would do a 3-letter code for. Okay, so nothing gets duplicated. It's always 3 letters, and so every collection has its own unique 3-letter code. Now, if we have it, so this complex file name, I'm calling it, this is the ideal situation. This is a situation where we've got the items sorted out in archival boxes. So we've already gone through, we've made a finding aid, we've got the series number, we've got the box number, we got the folder number, we got all that stuff. So those 3 things in the middle, series, box, folder, we usually don't have those on our file names, but I wanted to be like as explicit as possible. Like this is the most complicated it's going to get. If we have it all built out, we're going to have series, we're going to have box, we're going to have folder. And then, of course, we're going to have the item name. We always have the item or file name, and we started with the thousands, so we have 3 zeros to make sure that we would cover our bases. No matter what, we're not going to have more than 9,999 items in any collection. Pretty much just taking an educated guess on that one. And then scanning location, it's either LIB or it is MAM. So LIB means library, MAM is for Mount Airy Museum. And so this is a simple file name, and this shows you the MAM at the end for Mount Airy Museum. This is what we do most of the time. It's just like we have a community, so we know that, right? We always know the community. We know the collection, which is a 3-letter code, and then we always have the item number. So it's the first item in the collection is 001, and then Mount Airy Museum MAM. I mentioned that we have abbreviations. These are the community abbreviations we've used. We've continued to use these. So we've built up a great collection of things by community. So our first year has just become 4 years of building a giant collection. Everything we do relates back to these communities in our county. And the last thing is just another shared vocabulary list. This was one of the business lists that we came up with. And again, it's a hierarchy. So Surry County, Mount Airy, business, and then agriculture, chickens. All right, so we can break it down. In all of our item records, we have every one of those. They all link out to a central spot. So I can link to Mount Airy chickens, or I can link to chickens in general. And anybody can get to those any way they want to. It's just a matter of building the website out to that level. So anyway, that's the gist of what I had to share, mainly that we had to do a lot of working together to develop procedures and policies not approved by the board, but things we did together as a group to make sure we were keeping consistency and that these were the words that we're going to use when we, in our metadata, when we're building out our website and building out our Omeka, the back end of the website.
Thank you so much, Alan. This is fascinating. I love seeing the behind the scenes stuff behind these big projects. So this is great. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly, just so I can make sure everyone gets a chance to see our speakers' information should you want to contact folks. And let me just make sure. There we go. But I do want to we've got a few more minutes left over the top of the hour. I'd love to get to questions from folks. And I do know we had one come in early on, I believe during Erin Larmore's presentation, but I think this question could be answered by anyone. And that is there a difference between a donor form and a deed of gift? So do any of our speakers want to speak to that?
Me, there's not a difference. And I'm actually, our deed of gift, for folks who want to see it, like I said, it's been vetted up and down legal on campus. It's longer than I would like it to be, but it has all the information that the lawyers made us put in it. So if anyone's interested in seeing it, it's in the chat window now. But I mean, Erin and Alan, I don't know about you guys, but I use the words interchangeably.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, to me, it's the same. I'm not an expert in this, but to me, that's how I would call it. So it's a synonym, I think.
Yeah, same. I mean, we use deed of gift for outside donations, and we use records transfer to indicate internal donations or internal transfers rather. And yeah, I would use that term interchangeably.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
same. We have a different form for internal transfers too, because to be honest, they can't give you the gift because it's their job to give it to you. Yeah, the forms are different, and our form for records transfer, I'll see if I can find it and pop it in the chat. We have a LibGuide. I just have to find it, but you'll see that it's significantly shorter than the external formally lawyered deed of gift.
Great, okay. And just I'm curious for Alan and Erin Alsop, is your legal team involved in your deed of gift forms?
No.
No.
They're not. I think our deed of gift form was literally just stolen from somebody else and use it.
Yeah, they're not involved with us either.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Very few of these even went to the board of trustees or anything like that. Like, this is all internal.
Okay.
There were some things that did go through the board that we have, but mainly the things that Aaron A and Aaron L talked.
Yeah.
Not so much these little internal project things.
We had the misfortune of lawyers being involved because development got involved, because they consider the donation of material goods to the university to be something that development needs to track as gifts in kind. And so
okay.
that opened a door of lots of people who make a lot more money than I do, arguing over wording and things like that.
Okay.
That's a good point, because it wasn't until we got involved with the Digital Heritage Center's Hidden Collections Grant from a few years back. And one of the things that we had to fill out on the form was referenced insurance and what do we value the materials at. And I didn't send the message to procure, was it procurement or risk, or that somehow risk got involved, and they had all sorts of questions about, well, what's the insurance? What are we insuring? They didn't even know that this department even existed at the time. So it was a big learning experience all around, I will say. But yeah, I mean, if there are any concerns with language and legal and that kind of thing, I mean, I would always just bring it to your, if not your immediate supervisor, then the dean of the library, or someone who has that administrative connection to help maybe answer any questions.
That's helpful. Thank you, Erin. We did have another question come in. Does the collection policy address weeding for internal transfers? And I guess it's a question for Erin, Laura more, and maybe, I'm willing for everyone essentially, but I'll let whoever wants to jump in on that, go ahead.
Our collection development policy is focused on external acquisition. So we have, just like the community college folks, the UNC system has a retention schedule that comes down from on high and outlines what we use. And so, now is that we also don't have a formal records management mandate, as most of you do. Like, I am not the records manager, but sometimes I have to play that role in terms of interpreting the retention schedule. But when it comes to kind of weeding internal materials, that's driven by the retention schedule, which does leave a lot of wiggle room with things like historical artifacts and photographs that the archivist can choose from. When it comes to external materials and things being weeded out after it's acquired, we do make it abundantly clear to donors that just because something comes into the collection doesn't mean that every single piece of paper is going to be there for perpetuity. We do talk about weeding, and we talk about using professional best practices to do that. And I think it's one of the bullet points on like page 2 of the donor form that legal vetted, because we insisted that that be on there. We don't have this on our policy, our form right now, I don't think. But when I worked at NC State, our form actually had a checkbox that the donor could check, like, do you want your, if we weed stuff out and we decide not to keep it in the collection, do you want your stuff back, or can we just get rid of it? And I genuinely don't remember in the history of working there anyone ever saying, I want my stuff back. It was always, please put it in the recycle bin or deal with it appropriately. But yeah, that's always part of the conversation we have, as well as kind of that caveat on the forms in terms of, things may be weeded, if there's duplication or it's not deemed essential to the collection or something like that.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to add anything to that? If not, I see that it's already a little over 11. I did want to ask one final question, because I'm sure there's some folks who are here who do have policies in place, but they are thinking about amending them or reviewing them. And I was wondering if anyone had any advice on how often to review those policies, who needs to be involved in making that kind of decision. If there's anything, any advice you'd like to share.
I can share something. I will say, at least with everything, the state of the world nowadays with COVID and all that stuff, and our own experience with the ransomware attack, look at your policies, if not once a year, then every other year, especially as you start to take on, if you start to take on born digital records. If you haven't, or you don't even know what to do with that, then, that's probably a whole other session that we could host. But thinking of what you will have, what steps you need to put in place in the future, and what you need to, look back on and change, and what you need to account for. Because, you can have policies in place, but things can still happen. So by reviewing it at least once a year, if not every other year, you're in I think, a safer spot.
Great, thank you. Any other final thoughts from our speakers today? If not, you folks have been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all this information. I see we've got some thank yous in the chat as well. So this was wonderful. We're already after 11, so we'll close out now. But for our participants, please look for an email from me. I'll be sending out an evaluation form that or evaluation survey, we'd love to hear from you. And then of course the slides and the recording are linked to access that recording. But again, thank you all for joining us this Thursday morning, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks everyone.